All right, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. This is Hewitt Tomlin with Teambuilr, and I have Ryan Fair with me here. And we will get to our presentation in a minute, but just want to take care of some housekeeping items first and foremost. First, this is a webinar that's put on jointly by Teambuilr and Strength Performance Network, and we'll tell you a little more about these two companies right now. First, Strength Performance Network is the premier online social network dedicated to the strength and conditioning industry. They cover all the bases, including posts, photos, and videos, including job openings, workout tips, and just general content from coaches around the world in the strength and conditioning profession. I am close with these folks as they are obviously a partner of ours, and they've been showing me some of the things they've been doing for the near future, and they've got some exciting changes coming up in terms of the website and the content that they are sharing. So make sure to visit them daily if you do not already. And then, of course, I am from Teambuilr, and Teambuilr is affordable strength and conditioning software for coaches. We work with coaches at all levels around the world, delivering a digital experience for weight rooms and strength and conditioning programs around the world. So with that being said, we'll move on here and talk about today's webinar. And before I kick it over to Ryan here, I just want to explain a little bit about how we came up with this programming and why we chose Ryan and why we chose this topic. As we all know, the strength and conditioning industry in the high school realm is changing for the better. Strength coaches are getting hired more often. It's being taken more seriously. But we believe overall it still has a long way to go. And one of the best steps to kind of bridging the gap, so to speak, between high school athletics and strength and conditioning is education. And that's why everyone is here today on Mother's Day to learn a little bit more, to get well versed in this topic. And today Ryan's going to talk specifically about how strength coaches truly impact high school programs. And he's going to help arm us with the information that we need to communicate the value that strength and conditioning can bring to a high school program in a high school setting. So Ryan is here with us. Ryan, thank you so much. I'm going to hand it over to you, and you're going to start off by telling us a little bit about yourself. So I'll skip that and let you go ahead and run with it.
Yeah, thanks, Hewitt. And first of all, I'd just like to thank everybody for joining us today on this Mother's Day Sunday. I know there's you got a lot of things going on with family and friends. So to take 30 minutes or so out of your time to join us, I really appreciate it, because I think it could really go a long way to help our student athletes at the high school level. Just a little bit about myself. I'll try to be as brief as possible, but just to give you a feel from where I came from, my background. I graduated from the University of Florida with my undergrad in applied physiology and kinesiology. But really, my coaching career started before I ever walked across that stage as a graduate, and it started actually at the high school level. I was 18 years old, and probably less than a month out following walking across the high school graduation stage when I began coaching. I was in the DeLand High School weight room, working out with the assistant principal, who's a great friend of mine, and we still work out to this day. And during that summer after my senior year of high school, I was in the weight room, and the new head baseball coach actually was getting a tour of the facility. The baseball coach that had coached me for 4 years had recently been relieved of his duties at DeLand High School, and so the new coach was getting a look around the facility. I introduced myself and offered any services that I could to him, not really thinking much of it. Figured he had his staff in place, but he actually said, "Well, as a matter of fact, we have a freshman summer practice tomorrow, and I could use somebody to throw BP." I didn't tell him that I have some of the worst cutters in the world when I throw BP, so I offered to take that for him, and so the next day I showed up and I threw BP, and I've been coaching high school baseball and coaching the high school athlete ever since in all different kinds of capacities. So that's really where my coaching career began. To kind of jump ahead a little bit, by the time I was a sophomore or junior in college, I actually got an opportunity to be a volunteer intern at Stetson University, which is Division I university here in my hometown of DeLand, Florida, which was a unique experience for me, because while I was also coaching and able to volunteer as a high school coach, I was now able to apply those things that I was learning through my formal education in the baseball field and do it now with collegiate athletes when I was only 19 or 20 myself. And I was the only intern at the very beginning, because Stetson was in their inaugural year having a strength and conditioning program. So I got to coach a lot every single day, which was awesome. And not only was I the only intern, but there was also no full-time assistant either. So I was able to basically take on the assistant role, and which is why I was promoted to an assistant intern position. So after 3 months, I started receiving paychecks and continued to work kind of as a full assistant in a sense. After my time at Stetson University, I continued to coach at the high school level, still at DeLand High School, but I got my first opportunity to intern in professional baseball with the Los Angeles Dodgers. And by the time I graduated from the University of Florida, I had a full-time offer to be a strength and conditioning coach with the LA Dodgers in the minor league system. Fast forward, I spent 1 full year with them plus the internship, and then I also served a short stint with the New York Mets organization. But regardless of where I've gone in my strength and conditioning, my short strength and conditioning career thus far, I've always been drawn back to high school. So every time I completed a season with professional baseball, I always, the next day that I was able to come home from my affiliate, I was on the high school baseball field or in the high school weight room working with athletes. And that's ultimately led me to not only this passion, but the position I'm in now, which is beginning to create a full-time position as a strength and conditioning coach at DeLand High School here in DeLand, Florida. And it's kind of in the beginning stages of that, but that's why I've returned home and returned to the high school level. And I'm so thankful to be able to speak to you guys today on such a topic, or a topic I'm so passionate about. Next, I'd just like to take a moment for some acknowledgments and to thank a couple people. First of all, Teambuilr, the Strength Performance Network, for approaching me on this topic and asking me to speak. For me, there's nothing greater than not only trying to impact the high school athlete, but trying to create a platform to do it on, beyond your own realm and try to get the message out to as many people as possible. So Strength Performance Network and Teambuilr, I thank you guys so much. The NSCA as well for helping promote this event, and then also they've taken quite a few steps in the recent months to try to improve high school strength and conditioning, doing their own set of webinars and different events, special interest groups, Coach Schofield and everybody, Coach Vanderbush, just trying to improve high school strength and conditioning. I think it's incredible what they've done. And finally, before we move on to the actual presentation, I'd just like to thank my mentor, and he's a brother and almost a second father to me in a sense, Andy Lyon, who was the high school baseball coach that came in during the summer after my senior year and asked me to throw BP for him. I've lived in his guest bedroom so that I could coach for him. He's given me immense opportunities to learn to coach, and he's taught me invaluable lessons. So for that, I wouldn't be here without him. So I'd just like to thank him. But getting to the to really the goal of this presentation, as Hewitt said, it's really just to illustrate and elaborate why exactly the strength and conditioning professional can be such a valuable asset to the high school setting. I think we all know these things, and we are aware of the ways in which we can impact not only athletes, but a high school athlete specifically. But I'd like to be able to try to arm you with the ability to maybe take that as information that you can bring to a high school that doesn't currently have a strength and conditioning professional and kind of pitch that idea to them. And also maybe just to enlighten a couple thoughts and a couple considerations that maybe you or somebody who may not even be a strength and conditioning professional or full-time strength coach that's on this webinar, but be able to give them some a different perspective as to why it still is such an important position at the high school level. So we'll touch on 3 aspects of how a strength and conditioning coach can make an impact in the high school setting. I see it from 3 different levels that we can add value to the high school, and the first and most obvious, as it's named on this presentation, is impacting the student athlete themselves, and so that's looking at from safety, performance enhancement, and then personal development as well. So these are 3 aspects that we'll obviously touch on, but I think those are the most immediate ways that we can make a difference right off the jump at the high school setting. The second is an impact on the athletic department, and this is important because although we're gearing towards the student athlete, we want to give the best resources possible to our athletes. To be able to get a full-time position or some sort of strength and conditioning requirement or position at the high school level, we're going to have to pitch it to the athletic department and the athletic director and the administration. So to be knowledgeable and aware of ways in which the high school strength and conditioning coach can help the high school athletic department beyond just the weight room itself, and the athlete themselves, I think, can be very beneficial as well. And finally, the impact on the school and the community. So again, now we're looking at what are ways that we can talk to our principal and athletic director and give them ways in which that we can be a valuable asset beyond just the school, so that when they need to pitch this to maybe per se the school board for the county, or if it goes beyond that, it's farther reaching our value beyond just the school itself. So those are kind of the three levels in which I see that we can add value to the high school setting. So first and foremost, we're looking at it from the perspective of how we can add value to and help the student athlete and positively impact the athlete. As a strength and conditioning coach, we've all been taught since day one, whether it's through the NSCA textbook or just through our own research of the field and the career path. We know what our goals are, our two most important goals anyway, and those are injury reduction or prevention and performance enhancement. Those are inherent with the position itself, and that's what we're trying to accomplish. So ultimately, those are ways that right off the jump, the strength and conditioning coach can go to an athletic department or to an athletic director and say, these are the ways in which I can improve I can improve the circumstances for the high school athlete. But moreover, there's another one, and this is one that I think sometimes is lost outside of those that are actually in the profession. But we know as coaches, this is exactly why most of us are actually in strength and conditioning or in coaching in general, and that's personal development. So we'll touch on those three aspects. So I believe that the most immediate way that the strength and conditioning coach can actually make an impact on, say, day one, when they come on the high school campus and go into the weight room, is through safety. So we'll look at that through two different lenses, and the first one is injury reduction. So we look at trying to avoid the non-contact soft tissue injuries that we see on the field, whether it's in practice or competition. And we all know and we're aware of it that we can't necessarily prevent these, but we can reduce them as much as possible. But sometimes they're just going to be unavoidable. So through our training, our programming, periodization, and all the different aspects that the strength coach can bring to this position, we hope to reduce the likelihood of injury during practice and on the field during competition. But I think the most immediate impact is through injury prevention. And when I talk about injury prevention, I'm looking at it from the standpoint of what goes on in the weight room or in a conditioning session itself. And I think as a strength and conditioning coach, the absolute worst possible case scenario is that an athlete gets hurt under our supervision or through our neglect in the weight room. We have athletes that are dealing with hundreds of pounds of load, sometimes in very chaotic situations, in maybe smaller weight rooms with lots of athletes due to time and logistical constraints. So the last thing in the world that we want to see is an athlete get hurt due to, whether it's improper coaching, negligence, or just a lack of supervision altogether. So that, I think, is the immediate way in which we can impact on day one the high school settings, trying to minimize those injuries. So again, this is just basically reiterates those points, is the fact that injury reduction is incredibly important. We don't want our athletes to get hurt on the field, but moreover, we need to provide our athletes with structure and safety and discipline in the weight room so that they're able to ensure they get that, not only get that training so that they can perform at their best, but they don't miss any time on the field or suffer some sort of catastrophic injury that can make a greater impact and sustain those while they're in the weight room. And kind of it begs the question for me, and this could be something that you can use as ammunition when you're speaking with somebody higher up within the high school. If we don't have somebody that's credentialed or certified in the weight room, it's within their scope of practice to monitor the athlete on a day-to-day basis and supervise the actual lifting sessions. If we don't have somebody like that in the weight room, we're putting these young children oftentimes in a position to get hurt. And do we really want to predispose our children or our young adults to getting hurt? Is that something that we cognizantly want to know is a risk? And I think the obvious answer you're going to get is no, and we all know that, but that might not be something that an athletic director, principal, or even the sport coaches necessarily think of when they consider the weight room. And finally, I included this slide on the presentation because it was 10 immediate ways that I can come up with that a strength and conditioning coach can improve safety, again, on day one. So it's immediate impact, it's immediate value that the strength coach can add on a day-to-day basis from the very beginning. And so this ranges from everything from we have establishing a weight room culture of discipline, and really that just pertains to establishing proper behavior so that the athletes aren't horseplaying and putting themselves or another athlete in a position to get hurt. Appropriate or suitable attire, so the right the right gear. I mean, no athletes in boat shoes or flip-flops or barefoot or when the weight room's crowded. So setting that standard just to ensure that, again, that the most minimal risk of injuries is present in the weight room. We look at the layout of the equipment and facilities, or the weight room flow, so basically how the session is developed and how the weight room is structured, so that when athletes move from one station to the next, or one exercise to the next, or piece of equipment to the next, they're in an appropriate lane or window or path to make sure they're not bumping into each other. So you have an athlete that's attempting to do a PR squat or clean, and then you have somebody running across with a medicine to try to get a medicine ball. So again, obvious to us as strength and conditioning coaches, but maybe not quite so obvious to somebody on the outside. We also look at weight room capacity and having a strength coach that can sit there and make the schedule so that we don't have 60 athletes per coach in a weight room that should probably only hold 25 to 30 athletes. Teaching when and how to properly spot an exercise, or when and how to properly dump a weight or drop a weight on the floor so that the athlete doesn't get hurt. Teaching of proper exercise technique, and then monitoring and supervising the athletes through all of their lifts, or as much as humanly possible, and regulating their loads and intensities during the session. So again, just to make sure that the risk of injury is minimized. And these are 10 ways right off the jump that we can make sure that the athlete's in a safer position once we come on campus. Now, while safety is probably not the first thing that our athletes or our parents think about when they think about a strength and conditioning coach coming in, performance enhancement might be the first thing that comes across their mind as a student athlete, as a parent, and probably as a sport coach. These are the things this is the aspect that jumps to the forefront. How can we make my son or daughter better? How can I get better? Or how can the students on my team, how can we get in a better position to win? And I think for us this is the most obvious, so I'll try to spend little time on it, but we look at, from a day-to-day perspective, cycle to cycle, and then year to year. So on a daily basis, I mean, one of the first things that I was able to add when I first began coaching, I was 18 years old, had no idea what I was doing, but I knew on day one that the days that I had of 4 years straight of running out the center field for practice, touching the wall, and then standing in a circle and touching my toes and leaning to the right, to the left for 30 seconds apiece, wasn't going to cut it. I needed to provide my athletes with some sort of dynamic warm-up, something to get them up, moving, and sweating. And I was able to implement that right from the beginning and hopefully have that carry over to their performance and their preparation for the day. So that's something that a strength coach can implement immediately. And not only that, we also know as strength and conditioning professionals that not only are we just preparing them for the session at hand, but we also have the ability to make little marginal gains day to day through our warm-ups and teach our athletes how to move. So a strength and conditioning professional that's credentialed and formally educated, has experience to bring to the table, knows these things and is able to implement them. Exercise selection is another way, again, looking at progression, regression, and then lateralizing different movements, just to make sure that our athletes are doing appropriate exercises and movements that are the most beneficial for them at that point in time. So you look at a sport coach who's running a program by themselves, the best that they could come up with, or a weightlifting coach that is not certified in any way, or just a PE teacher. Their exercise selection, their exercise bank or library, it might be a lot smaller than, say, the strength and conditioning professionals. They may not have the means to know how to progress or regress, more importantly, an exercise for an athlete. And they might not know how to audible and change to maybe change programming or exercises on the fly. which is something that you have to be able to do, especially if you're going to do in-season training, based upon the readiness of the athlete and also just a lot of the minor bumps and bruises you're going to have along the way with different athletes, or if they come late because mom couldn't get off of work in time, or things of that nature. So just something to be prepared for that the strength and conditioning coach might have more experience in, or should have more experience in. We look at more of a weekly and monthly basis of improving performance, so trying to create longer-standing adaptations and trying to peak the athlete and get them ready to perform at the highest level for their season, or just to make improvements over the course of the off-season. So again, as strength and conditioning professionals, we've been educated and we've been held to a standard with, say, the CSCS and other certifications for programming. There's a minimum baseline of what we should know about taking an athlete from a base level and progressing them and getting them ready for their season. Whereas a gym coach or PE teacher or sport coach, nothing against them, but that's just not within their scope of practice, and that might not be something that they've been held to a standard on. So regardless of what they might know, we don't know exactly what level it is that they're being held to. So this is the way in which the strength and conditioning professional can improve performance, and the high school can know that there's a standard baseline for the knowledge base that they're bringing in as well. And the third aspect of performance enhancement is just looking at a year-to-year basis, and this is something that I think is a more long-standing project, but something that as a strength and conditioning coach we will ultimately seek to bring. So we want to bring in annual training plans for each of our teams, obviously, and take our teams from their off-season through their training into the preseason, into the season, postseason. But also taking an athlete and taking them through a quadrennial plan. And I'll be quite honest with everybody and frank. I mean, that's not something I'm going to have on day one, and that's going to be a process that's going to be a long-term building block from year to year to try to get that established. But if you can assure an athlete and a sport coach that there is going to be a plan, so that when an athlete comes in as a freshman, they're going through a block zero of sorts, and we're progressing them over the course of 4 years to where they go on to the next level of competition or the next phase of their life when they graduate high school, that they've progressed as student athletes, they've progressed in the weight room, on the field, and they can live a healthier lifestyle. If they know these things going in, the adherence is going to be much higher, and also I think the motivation is going to be a lot higher. So you might have a student athlete that may not be getting the playing time they want. They might come in on day one and think the bodyweight squats are beneath them. But if you can assure them, look, hey man, I got a 4-year plan for you, and we're developing it, and I'm going to take you from this right here into an absolute monster by the time you get out of here, I think you're going to get a lot more buy-in, a lot more excitement to be in the weight room than, say, somebody that just says, here's the workout for the day, you're doing power cleans, hang cleans, high pulls, bench press, and push press, and it's the same every single day. I think you have the opportunity to make a greater impact through the year-to-year planning. And finally, we just look at some additional considerations. So looking at the over-specialization aspect, which I could talk for an hour on alone, but just to touch on it, the strength and conditioning coach knows and is aware of sports such as baseball and basketball that get overused, where the athletes are playing year-round, and can go about it in a way that they can offset maybe some of that playing, and to kind of take a concept that I got from Ryan Horn, a buddy of mine who's the men's basketball coach at Wake Forest. He talks about the pyramid being upside down, where the peak of your pyramid should be the specialized training and competition, and the base is that generalized training and that preparation. Well, right now in youth sports culture today, we have that pyramid upside down, where the base is actually up top, and we're held together on that little bit of specialization on the bottom, and can easily tip in either direction. So the strength and conditioning professional is aware of this and can actively try to shift that pyramid around. And if you think about maybe a sport coach who's in charge of the weight room and in charge of their athletes solely, if they don't have a strength and conditioning coach, they may not have quite the same, not only knowledge base about this topic, but really the incentive to flip that pyramid over. Because, for instance, in high school baseball, a lot of head baseball coaches are travel ball coaches as well. They want their best student athletes playing in their travel ball organizations, and they might think that's the best way for their student athlete to go to the next level. So that's what they're going to be encouraging regardless of what it might be doing to their body. So definitely something that the strength and conditioning coach can consider. We look at recovery and then game loads and physical preparedness each day and each week. So areas that the strength and conditioning professional is a little more well-versed than say, a sport coach who might have a formal education and an entirely different background. We're looking at nutrition, sleep quality, tissue quality, and then taking into account academic stressors, which we now know plays a vital role into the preparation or the preparedness of an athlete, game load, playing time, things that, again, somebody who's not credentialed or formally educated in strength and conditioning and performance enhancement may not be thinking of. And although it may not be within our scope of practice to give our athletes a nutrition plan, let's say, we still are able to provide them with some sort of guidance on the matter to help them live a happier and healthier lifestyle and improve performance on the field. Finally, we look at personal development. I think this is one that it probably isn't, again, it's something that's immediately in the forethought of every student or parent when they think about a strength and conditioning coach, but I guarantee you that's why the majority of the people that listen to this webinar got into coaching themselves and got into strength and conditioning. That's to help develop each athlete as the whole person. I'm not going to go over these statistics too much, but just for some information, we've all seen some form of these statistics before. The probability of playing at the next level depending on the sport. And as you can see, the number of high school athletes from 500,000 to 1 million in certain sports, such as football, that are participating every year, and the percentages being 7 or less for most of the sports of playing at the collegiate level and then ultimately playing at the professional level. So why am I throwing these statistics in here if we've seen them before? I want to beg this question. Why do we do what we do as strength and conditioning coaches and coaches in general when we know that the odds are so heavily slanted against us and having our performance the performance of our athletes actually take them to the next level? Obviously, winning is one answer, but I think more importantly is that in high school, more than I think any other level, it's got to be about personal development with the student athletes and trying to not only develop them as somebody who's competing on the field, but somebody that can be successful and competitive in life. So when they walk across the stage and grab their diploma, they're actually going out into the community and have the ability and the means and resources and the wherewithal to try to be successful contributors to the community. And I believe wholeheartedly that the weight room is probably one of the best places in the world to ultimately make a difference in an athlete or in a student's life. It builds so much character, so much work ethic, discipline, persistence, because they're going to run up against so much adversity, not only on the field and in their life, but in the weight room. It's a way of metaphorically running against adversity, because every single rep you're going against a load and you're having to overcome it. And furthermore, beyond that, the strength and conditioning coach can actually not just change an athletic career, but can change a life, especially with such young and impressionable young adults. Over the course of 4 years, we have the privilege to work with these athletes and build relationships. And as you guide them and give them your knowledge and impart those experiences that you have as a strength coach, you're able to take that guidance and build trust. And through that trust and those relationships that you're building, that's when you can ultimately break down any barriers that are going to stop you from making the greater impact, which is on their lifestyle, so living a healthier lifestyle, but also on their entire lives. So trying to build the qualities to make them, again, successful young adults that turn into adults the second they walk across that stage and turn 18 years old. Switching gears completely now, I'd like to look at the ways in which the strength and conditioning professional can improve the high school setting and add value, but through the entire athletic department. So we'll touch on 3 things a little more briefly. We'll look at how it can impact the sport coaches, how it can help create a better medical staff, and how it can help limit liabilities as well. So first, we're looking at actual freedom for the sport coaches. If you've been in the high school setting, you'll probably have realized that sport coaches, for the most part, are probably the most passionate people that you'll ever meet. They do what they do, and very similar to our jobs. They coach these athletes and coach the whole person as well, and they do it for way too little pay. They also are an incredible hat rack where they wear so many hats throughout the day between educator, because a lot of them are actual teachers as well. And they deal with academia. They deal with parents on a daily basis. A lot of them deal with just students, not student athletes, but just normal general education students. And then they have to coach. So if you try to throw on top of that a weight training program that they have to try to find on their own or develop on their own and spend an extra couple hours a week in the weight room on top of that, it's not something that we want to put on their already full plate. Additionally, I don't think that they should have to do that, and that's because it's not in their scope of practice. I touched on this earlier. We may not be able to make nutrition plans for our athletes because we're not registered dietitians, or most of us are not, but we can provide guidance, but we shouldn't be making those plans because they're not in our scope of practice. Just like we wouldn't conduct neurosurgery, just like we wouldn't drive a school bus because most of us are not certified to drive a school bus. Those are not within our scope of practice, so we shouldn't have to undertake those things. And if we are having to take that on as a responsibility, are we really providing our student athletes with the best resources possible? And that's kind of the question that needs to be begged to the athletic department themselves. So next I'll look at some scenarios that you will see, though, at the high school setting when the sport coach is running the strength training program. The first thing you might see is the coach. This is one of the better scenarios, but the coach is going to outsource their training to either a consultant or a private facility. This works because usually you're bringing in somebody educated that can help your team, but a lot of times the amount of time that they're able to spend with the student athletes is pretty limited, and they don't have a lot of exposure to the student athletes beforehand, so they can't really have the same kind of impact that a strength and conditioning coach can when they're exposed to the athlete every single day, more often than probably the sport coaches are. And not only that, usually the coach is going to have to pay for this out of their own pocket or out of the team's annual budget, or it's going to have to come from the athletic department. So again, instead of just bringing in somebody in-house that can run the program, the sport coach is going to have to fund it themselves, or even have their players and families fund it at least incrementally, which again I think I'd much rather see a full-time person in that position that is provided by the school and not provided by the sport coach themselves or the student athletes and their families who have to pay. Second scenario would be a coach doing their own homework, so the coach spending his or her own time to do as much research as they're able to do to try to develop their own program. And obviously we know the downfalls of that, depending on where they're getting the information from, whether it's Muscle and Fitness Magazine, bodybuilding.com, or from actual literature. We have no idea. And I remember, just an example, when I was in high school, I know my baseball coach did the best they possibly could, but I know I had a muscle and fitness workout because I saw it. I knew exactly where it came from because I asked why we were doing things, and the answer was the sheet of paper that came out of the magazine. So again, it was structured, it was something, but obviously not the best resource that we can provide our student athletes. The third is a coach drawing from their own experiences, and I see this one an awful lot. So sport coaches saying, well, I played at XYZ university, I played at a high level, I played professional sports, and this is what we did. We did Nautilus, we did one set of this, we did CrossFit. Whatever the answer might be, regardless of whether it worked for them, I look at it from this perspective. Regardless of what the actual methodology is, it was one program that worked for one specific person under one specific set of circumstances in a certain period of time. Our athletes today are in a much different time, under much different circumstances, and they're much different people than the next athlete next to them, let alone a coach from that played 20 years ago. It's not to say that that program wouldn't work, but we just know it's not quite as flexible. So not only may it not work in the off season, but it certainly is not going to work in season or be as beneficial to all the athletes. And again, it's about providing the best resources possible to our student athletes. Fourth, the coach just completely wings it. I've seen this one quite a few times. 5 minutes before the workout starts, they're scribbling the workout on the board, or they're doing a workout of the day of sorts. And finally, the coach, and this one happens probably the most frequently, the coach opts not to train their team at all in the weight room. Again, we're avoiding maybe some bigger issues of somebody getting hurt in the weight room or doing something improper, which could be some sort of benefit, but it's still not the ultimate resource that we can provide our athlete, which is a credentialed and certified and formally educated strength and conditioning coach in the weight room. And so again, it begs the question, are any of these scenarios best for our student athletes and athletic department moreover? From there, I'd just like to touch on really quick kind of a better medical staff. Thankfully, at this point in time, it seems like athletic trainers, ATCs, are pretty prevalent on high school campuses. I know they're not everywhere, but in some of the more populated areas with some of the bigger and more competitive schools, you're seeing athletic trainers in high amounts, which is awesome. And it's a great resource for our student athletes. But ultimately, there's still usually just one athletic trainer for the entire athletic department and all those student athletes. So it's basically a 1 to a few hundred ratio, which is unfair for the athletic trainer and just isn't the best circumstances for the athletes. So it's hard for them to give that optimal care to the student athlete when they're spread out so thin, trying to not only cover in-season sports, but try to cover individual athletes, their rehabilitation, or even if they even touch on it, but prehabilitation, screening, things like that. I mean, you may not see any of that because the athletic trainer is going to be busy most of fall, summer, and really parts of spring working, let's say, football. Meanwhile, a wrestler is trying to track the athletic trainer down to get a bag of ice for a twisted ankle. Meanwhile, baseball is on the other side of campus, and they have a player that's showing signs of heat exhaustion, and you're having the athletic trainer with just some student assistant trainers trying to help them out. This is not a great scenario for our student athletes. So I think a strength coach can absolutely help ease this burden and develop a greater relationship in the entire athletic department through a joint relationship with the athletic trainer. And here's just 5 ways, again, off the jump, that there could be a pretty immediate impact of having a strength coach within the athletic department, helping to create a better medical staff, if you will. And that's first and foremost, if there's not already an injury report that's created because there hasn't been a need for it or enough people to share it with or that want to read it, having a strength coach there, the strength coach could go in and talk to the athletic trainer and say, hey, I'd like to have an injury report if you don't already have one, and I'll help you put it together, or just something so we can stay on the same page. And that communication is only going to help the student athlete, and I think it can only serve to then branch out to the sport coaches. I mean, that injury report can not only be sent to the strength coach, but to each individual coach, and on there, now everybody's aware of what Johnny is dealing with his turf toe and how he can, what he can do to try to help that. So when Johnny says, the athletic trainer told me I don't need to do anything today, well, the injury report says otherwise, Johnny says you can do X, Y, and Z. So that's just one scenario. We also look at just more of collaborative prehab and rehab planning, and this is something that I was able to kind of draw from professional baseball, where over the course of the season, as far as a medical staff goes in the minor leagues, it's just the strength coach and the athletic trainer, and they're tied to the hip. I know I certainly was with mine, and so we bounced a lot of ideas off each other over the course of a day, collaborating on return to play protocols and other protocols to try to help the athletes, whether it was their shoulder program for pitchers. And we tag team it, that way we both weren't overwhelmed. And again, it just provided better coverage and a better resource for the athletes. And then I'll touch on 2 more, just sharing of supervision as well. So the athletic trainer could send over athletes to the weight room to do their rehab or prehab work so that the athletic training room gets cleared out a little more. Again, providing a better environment for the student athlete, yes, and then also a much easier one for the athletic trainer themselves. And then you look at it's an additional third-party source for the athlete to report issues. So the athlete may not, we'll see oftentimes, not want to report an injury or something that's bothering them to their sport coach for the fear of losing playing time, but they might go to the athletic trainer. Well, the strength and conditioning coach can also be someone that they go to and say, hey, my hips really bothering me. I don't want to say anything. What should I do? As a strength coach, we can then use our knowledge to make a decision on who to tell, who to inform, and maybe what to hold the athlete out of, and then ultimately report that to the athletic trainer. So it's just another outlet for the athlete to make sure that they have the best resources and the best environment provided for them. Then we look at limiting liabilities, and I'll just touch on this very briefly because this is what we talked about earlier with safety. But having somebody that's formally educated, credentialed, and brings experience to the position of strength and conditioning coach only serves as a way to not only prevent injuries on the field in the weight room, but in total, from an athletic director's point of view, just limiting liabilities. This is the one that boggles my mind probably the most, is how a school that could have hundreds of athletes and could have a weight room that probably costs upwards of $70,000 or $80,000 worth of equipment in it, and them not put a professional in that room to ensure that not only is the equipment maintained so that nobody gets hurt, or the cleanliness is held to a high standard so nobody gets sick or infected, but also to make sure that nobody gets hurt while using that equipment. It kind of boggles my mind that somebody wouldn't already be in place at a lot of places, but that's honestly not the outlier. That's the norm. So being able to pitch to an athletic director that, hey, this can help ease your mind and ease the principal's mind when you think about the weight room. And if you haven't thought about liabilities, well, they're definitely there, and we'd like to limit those. Finally, the last level in which I believe a strength and conditioning coach can impact the high school setting in a positive manner is actually going beyond the school itself, or beyond the athletic department itself, and into the school and the community. So fostering pride, community spirit, and then just additional initiatives and clubs as well. So the strength and conditioning program, I think, has a unique opportunity to do something that an actual sport itself can do, which is get the community and get the youth that are not in the high school yet excited about the high school itself. So you look from a standpoint of like football. I know where I'm from in DeLand, football is king. The entire community gets excited about the football games. The town basically shuts down. The buses get their police escort to the games, and glass paint is written all over the downtown storefronts for the football team. It's all very exciting. The baseball team recently went out and read to the middle school students, and the strength and conditioning department has the opportunity to reach out to the community as well and get people excited about the school. So the students at the school themselves can be excited about being in an actual health initiative or weight training initiative that can help them improve their lifestyles and get them excited about being in the weight room. And then you could have the strength coach could be going out to the local middle schools, elementary schools, and help in collaborating with PE teachers, and really, I mean, the sky's the limit. It's whatever the strength coach is willing to take on, that's as far as the potential will go. So the more they're able to take on, I think the more excitement that the strength and conditioning professional can create in the school and in the community as well. And ultimately, we're trying, so this is from the reverse angle, using the students as a vehicle to improve the community in the school. As strength and conditioning coaches in the weight room, obviously, as I said earlier, we're trying to improve performance, but we're also trying to develop young students, young adults, and ultimately adults that can be successful and positive members in the community. So when they leave the high school, or when they leave the weight room and they're about campus, if we're helping to develop these young students into better men and women, it can only serve to more positively benefit the school and the community. So that's a major key that I think you could sell to a principal, or a principal could sell to the school board as well. And finally, just a couple other miscellaneous ways. I mean, through weightlifting or powerlifting clubs, the non-athlete classes. So as you take on a new position, there's a good chance you're not going to have all sport classes. to train your athletes or just solely athletes, you might have to deal with the general population student, and that's an, a lot of people might look at that as a detriment, but I see it as just a way to benefit a young adult and try to create a healthier lifestyle and guide them as well in a very similar way that you do an athlete. The only difference is they're only competing in the classroom and in life. They're not necessarily competing on the gridiron. But I think our impact can still be felt through them or can still be given to them as well. And as I said, ultimately, it's whatever the strength coach is willing to take on is how far their impact will go. And I think the sky's the limit in that sense. So overall, just to conclude and wrap everything up, I just wanted to hit you with some take-home messages. And so to ultimately, this is what you want to take into a meeting with the athletic department, sport coaches, whoever you're meeting with, or maybe this is just what I hope that you take from this webinar and kind of consider if you're not already a strength coach or not looking to go into the high school level at this point. I think the strength and conditioning professional is a vital and necessary hire for a high school. They can make an immediate impact and make it long-lasting, not just over time, but on day one. And they can do so through the student-athlete, through the athletic department, and through the school and community. So such a great outreach. Ultimately, the strength and conditioning coach is going to have a few goals, more so than any others, and that's the main goal is to provide the best care and resources possible for the student-athlete and to be an actual advocate for the student-athlete. And they'll do this through providing a safe and growth-minded environment to improve not just the student, not just the athlete, but the person as well. Guidance to be a successful student, athlete, and person, and to live a happier and healthier lifestyle. And finally, I think the strength coach can do this by providing another exciting component to the high school and to the community and to the high school experience. We always talk about the college experience for a student who's trying to find the right college to go to. Well, I think you look at the high school experience as well. This can be just another avenue to really further enhance the experience of a student athlete at the high school level.
All right. Well, that's going to conclude the webinar. I just want to jump in and first say before I close this out, when we invited Ryan to do the webinar, we did it because something stuck out. At the time, Ryan was with the Mets. And working over there. But Ryan, at the same time, still had this passion for high school athletics and high school strength and conditioning. He was blogging passionately about it, and I thought, this is a pretty unique situation where someone in this position is still so passionate that they devote time and energy into that track of education. So Ryan, just want to thank you for that, and obviously you're in a situation now that was a result of your passion to move down that way, so that was fantastic. A couple of points here before we head out with the webinar. Q&A we're not going to hold, but if you do have questions or want to continue this discussion, Ryan is very active on Twitter. So you can follow Ryan on Twitter if you just search his name, and I would pull it up here. I just don't have it on hand. Ryan, tell us what your Twitter handle is.
Yeah, so it's at my first name, Ryan, R-Y-A-N, _ F-A-E-R. So that's at Ryan _ Fair.
Very good. And of course, Teambuilr Strength and Performance Network is on Twitter as well. And Ryan, actually, you've been getting on Snapchat as well lately, and I obviously do that with Teambuilr, and you can get a lot of visual education through that. You're obviously very big into nutrition, which is a big deal in the high school level. So if anyone wants to do Snapchat as well, Ryan is on Snapchat. You can just search his name, Ryan Fair, and follow him there. And then a couple things as well. StrengthPerformance.com is the website for SP Network. It's totally free. It's fantastic. I call it the LinkedIn for strength coaches. In fact, I think that's kind of doing it a disservice. It's much better than LinkedIn. There's a lot more on there, and you get a lot more value out of it. So certainly create a profile if you have not already. And then if you'd like, you can also start a 14-day trial of Teambuilr. That's free as well, obviously. And it's just teambuilr.com if you would like to see what that is about. And then obviously you can get in touch with me directly. My name is Hewitt, and my email is hewitt@teambuilr.com. We're always looking for new topics and new speakers on this webinar. We want to give the people what they want in terms of the discussion. So if you have ideas or feedback, please, we absolutely welcome that. So with that being said, we're going to wrap up here. Everyone, there will be a recording of this webinar if you'd like to see it again or share it out. I know not everyone can make this, especially on a Sunday holiday. So within 24 hours, you will all receive an email, and I will be tweeting out the recording to this webinar that you can share or pass around. So thank you, everyone, for attending. Ryan, thank you for coming. Much appreciated.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And everyone, have a great day, and we'll see you at the next webinar coming up soon. It's actually in a little bit over a week. It's with Adam Ringler of Wichita State, and the topic will be on technology and strength and conditioning. So look out for the details on that coming out soon. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.